not get technical problems, and that's how we roll.
Yep, great.
Hello.
And then if we get technical problems, then we'll just release this one, and everyone will be like, "Wow, they even released their technical problem."
And we'll be like, "We told you." Yeah.
Right. We're very upfront about this.
Yeah.
So today, well, before we get into our topic, we're not under a time crunch per se, but we are bookended by some lessons that you're having right now at the Turnhalle, and I was curious what you were doing. Like, you just got done working out, and you're about to get going and working out, and so
that's right.
that's relevant to our stuff. So
yeah.
What you doing?
What am I doing? I just did a lesson on, I mean, every lesson is on fueling, right? Like, that's what the lesson always is. But yeah, we were working just real simple, like just soft, hard, Zornhau abnehmen, like which is which, how do you know? Like, and kind of really more easy than that, or more clear than that, was helping the student to understand what I was feeling in that. Why was I soft or hard? Because if the student came, well, we put it in terms of horses, because this is also somebody that does horses. So we put it in terms of horses, in that, like, if the student came with a primary thought of worrying about my sword, I hit them, right? If the student came with a primary thought of wrecking my face, now I've got to, like, make a bind and make something happen. Yeah. And so, and then in that bind, we developed it further so that it could begin with, I am also trying to have a good primary thought of their face, and they're thinking about my face. And then in that moment, I realize, oh, I need to defend myself. Then I get hard. Then they get to abnehmen, right? And developing it beyond the difference of, I come soft and noodly, and boy, she gets to hit me, and Zornhau is magic. Or right. I come like, gah, and then, they get to leave and like, and
right.
Me,
well,
and
so it helps to know that those are the choices that you make in those particular moments, because it's not like those moments are a figment of someone's imagination. Like, we like to say, well, no one's gonna, that's a fencing.
People do that all the time.
A HEMA cliche that kind of gets in my trash bin is the sort of, well, no one's going to behave like that if there's a real sword. It's like, oh, well, okay, like, all right, whatever. I really don't care. I don't care about that at all. Like, I don't care what people are going to behave like. First of all, I don't even care what people are going to behave like if it's a real sword. I'm never going to use a real sword against a real human. Full stop. Right. So there's that, right? But then also it's like, well, like, if you're designing your system to be predicated on the idea that people are going to behave in some set of ways, right? And the ways that you're saying they're not going to behave are not against the rules, right? Like, right. There's no rule that says someone can't take their sword and put it behind their back, right? No one is ever going to do that, probably.
Right. Probably.
Right? But I should have it's not against the rules, and so the match isn't going to stop if it happens. So I should have a way of dealing with that, right? Like, I should, you know what I mean? Like, we shouldn't treat that like, well, that's never going to happen, so we're not going to talk about it. It's like, no,
we're not going to address
talk about it
at all.
Right. Right. No, it's like, that doesn't help build a coherent system. The way that you deal with that is you say, okay, if someone puts their sword behind their back, then for these reasons, you stab them. Right. Maybe because it takes so long for them now to get their sword in front of them that you're gonna end up stabbing them safely. Like, okay, like if that's how you have to frame it, but that's what you do, right? And okay, so then it never happens, but if the case presents itself. So I guess what I'm saying is like, if someone is in a bind and then they just yield all pressure but have no sort of plan or
rejoinder,
they have no sense of like what they're gonna do in their weakening, right? So you can weaken to yield to the pressure so that you can choose a new line of attack or whatever, like exactly. Or you could just weaken because you're not doing anything, right? Either way, my plan is the same because I'm not beholden to like what your reasons were for doing the thing, but like I have to know if you just yield, then I should be thrusting into that, right? So
and so we build up from that, right? We build up from that. We start with that.
And that's what I was just about to say, is that the truth is, when you're playing a game with people and you play the game regularly and people get a sense of what they're doing, so like you transition from a state of I'm just kind of button mashing, right? Like I'm just kind of trying to see what the buttons do and get a sense of what actions work and what actions don't work or whatever. You move to a state where maybe you're not utilizing the full potential of all of the various things you could do, but you do have like a plan, right? Like I am going to put my point in your face, and if you try and push my sword aside, I am going to perform some action that's going to correspond to you pushing my sword aside, right? Well, now we're actually fencing, right? Now we're playing a game with each other. It's not two people just button mashing. It's like, and like, you know, we do start from there, but as you play with each other, you get a sense of like, okay, the way it really works in reality is no one does go weak for no reason. Right? Like sometimes people will in other contexts or whatever, and we have to have a plan for dealing with that, and we build our system up from there. But when we're playing, you know, I'm never going to weaken for no reason. So you might as well not think, you might as well not even think about that, right? Like you might as well start to develop a way of dealing with the smart things that you can expect me to do rather than the asinine things, which hopefully at my level or my, you know, at the stage of my fencing career, I'm not going to do that often. Although, you know, everyone is beholden to like human. Anyway, so okay, so go ahead.
Brains absolutely like seize up and blue screen and
exactly.
It happens.
Anyone's brain. I don't care how much money you spent on your $1 million computer with all of the fancy hard drives and SSD RAMs and things. It's gonna blue screen.
Absolutely. So that was really what we did was we started with I just soften up because I'm just like, oh, I hate this. So chase and stab me in the face, you know, and then, oh, I hate this. And so I overbind like unnecessarily. So leave, you know, you don't have to stay there. Right. And then we did it first with plastic swords. And then, you know, don't do this at home. But then I got out sharps so that the student could see what a feeling really was, because it becomes much more interesting with actual swords. And then we went back to plastic and developed with that understanding, right? Like, oh, you see how clear the difference is, but you see also we can start to slide into this middle place where I don't want to say both of us are trying to not make it clear, because I am always trying to make it clear, but where things get slippery and fuzzy and subtle. That's what I want to say. Things get subtle.
And so like, you know, you have to begin with, we've talked about this 1,000 times, like the largest level of detail, right? Where we only see like the giant structures, right? And then eventually we get to a place where it's like, well, okay, we know this is a house, right? So we like this, that's a house, and this is how we respond when house, right? But actually, there's house made of wood and house made of brick. Right. And it's like, and there is a slight difference in the way that we treat house made of wood from the way that we treat house made of brick. And as things get, as we go further and further down to the level of detail, we have more and more options. We're able to respond with more nuanced and, to the subtleties of things, right?
Yeah. And then start playing with things changing in time. Like if my student in this case has primary thought on my face, I cut, they Zornhau, they're in my face, then I harden up on them and try to push them out of the way. They still have the same reaction, but it doesn't happen with a feeling of ching or thunk or thunk, it happens with a shoosh,
Yeah.
But it's the same feeling. It's just more subtle. And so that's, there's all those different ways to play, and it doesn't fucking matter because it's still either you thrust my face or you leave and cut my head and cover your line. Don't care. You're still making the same choices. But I need to give you all of those. Like house, it's almost like, right? It's almost like, well, I'm thinking about this a lot in terms of language, we all have seen like a 2-year-old point at a tiger at the zoo and say kitty. And you're like, yeah, but no. Right.
For sure. Yeah. That's also a great metaphor. Talk a little bit about, go ahead.
Yeah. Understanding like the difference between a house cat and a tiger, is relevant, but they are both kitty.
They are both kitty, right? Yeah, exactly. We don't want to say, well, that's not like what, when I say that's not a kitty, I don't mean that's not a kitty because it is. Right.
But I mean, you got to be a little more worried about this kitty than the other one.
Well, and also, so like what's actually happening, right? It's like, okay, I don't mean that's not a kitty, but because it is, but it's not what you think kitty means. Right. So you have a sense of what kitty is that is not sufficiently nuanced. Right. Because this is an important distinction. Right. And that's not your fault that you don't know it's an important distinction. You're two. You just can see kitty. Right. You can't see the nuance, and that's fine because you're two. Right. But I'm here to help you. So I'm going to start showing you that this kitty looks like this, and this kitty will eat your face. Talking about time, changes in time. So there might be two ways that we might think about changes in time. So there's, if we think about the beat is my favorite thing ever. Right. So the beat is a thing that happens when you tap your foot, and then the beat is comprised of several little things that happen inside the beat, right? So it could be bunt da da bunt da, or bunt da da bunt da da, whatever it is, but like those are the things inside the beat. And so there's a question of where a thing happens. There's a question of where a thing happens in terms of the beat, right? So it's like we say 1 e and a 2 e and a, right? So we have a 1 e and a 4 things, right? So did the thing happen on the 1? Did it happen on the e? Did it happen on the and? Did it happen on the right? And all of those, if it happened any of those places, it's gonna be different, right? You just say it didn't just, it didn't happen on the beat, it happened on the and or whatever. Well, that's not good enough. We have to know if it happened on the e and or the right?
Yeah.
So there's that, but then there's also the change in the rate of the beat.
Yeah.
Right. So we have the change of, or the place in the beat that it happened versus did it happen in the same place in the beat, but everything just happened faster.
Right.
Right. And so that's another dimension that we can start to develop, right? Because because our training partners are not beholden to a steady beat. Like our coach should be initially when we're learning to develop our rhythm, right?
Yeah.
But when we're fencing, right, or at least after we get the rhythm down, then we have to be able to do the thing faster and slower. And then finally, like the ultimate goal with any of these skills is to be able to develop the sensitivity to respond to the rate of the beat or the tempo that our opponent is setting for us. Right? Does that make sense? So I wasn't sure. So, and just, I brought that up because you mentioned the time dimension, and I had immediately gravitated towards that aspect of the time
that
dimension.
version of it. Yeah.
Right. Which, but there are two relevant ones, right? And like both of them have to be addressed. And so I just wanted to break it out, right? So that, and it's I think, an opportunity for everyone to see.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I mean,
you got a train.
I'm sorry, I do have a train.
I love it.
Let's go train.
I love
it's trains. The worst place to record this. I swear to God, I don't know why I try. But
it's
okay,
pretty.
So, is it?
It's a pretty background.
Okay, it is. Yeah. So my development of a sense of beat is nowhere near yours. And it's something I'm working on. But so I have to think of it more.
Keep talking. I'm getting coffee.
Yeah, I have to think of it more simplistically. So, but one thing that I think about is what the broad rhythm of an action might be, or a string of actions might be. Because like, it's very easy for all of us to like fall into like some sort of like, I don't know, dance club sort of dong, 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 right? And I mean, maybe you do want to play in that for a minute, but like having a da-dun is real nice.
Right. Well, right? And so what I would say is that fencing actually, okay, so the donk, 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 right? So that's the beat. That's where all of our actions are falling on the beat, right?
Right.
So just in terms of like our Liechtensteinian metaphysics, right?
Sure. Yes.
That's wrong. That's not good fencing, right? So just like as a fundamental truth of Liechtensteinian KDF fencing, if all of your actions are happening on the beat, then nobody is working within the beat, right?
Correct.
So if no one's working within, then there is no indes happening, right? And that is not foreign. That happens all the time in fencing exchanges that we see, right? And so you've got a sort of like a parry riposte.
Yeah.
And then typically, unless there's like a misdirection, right? Unless there's a really sneaky misdirection, like you develop, like you condition particular lines or whatever,
sure.
That no one ends up hitting on those exchanges, right?
Yeah, I mean, or if somebody does, it's because somebody's parry was shit and they threw their hand in the way of the sword, right? Like, I mean, that's what I see a lot of.
There's a breakdown in technique or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, but like, but I don't feel like relying on guessing, right? The 50-50 style guessing, or just relying on your opponent's technique to break down, is like a poor strategy, right? If I'm playing chess and I'm like, I'm going to do this move because there's a 50-50 chance that they're going to choose the wrong move. Like, that's not like, why wouldn't we assume that our opponent is always going to make the right move? Right.
Yeah.
Like, and construct our system so that it enables us to deal with the wrong move. Right. So like to go back to what we started with, but also like that we're prepared for when they make a rational choice. Right? Like that's what we should be doing. So,
well, and I think even in the Liechtensteinian system, if that's a word, when we see when we see examples that are playing upon that idea, like, I mean, the easiest one to think of is Sver to Oxenflug, right?
Sure. That's what I was thinking you were going to say. Go ahead.
Oh, right. I mean, that's the easy one to go to, though. There's others I prefer, but that's the one everyone knows. And
it's not wrong, right? The misdirection is not, it's not, it'll get you there, right? Like, it's a thing that you can do.
Right. But I guess what I wanted to say was, like, even that one is intelligently constructed, right? And not in the way I see most people. I don't want to say that. Not in the way I see many people think they're seeing it in the wild, right? So if I throw Sver back and forth at your ears 75 times at a rate I'm not capable of doing, but some people athletically are, that isn't that play. But people will say that's that play. And I'm like, no, this play opens with an Unterhau, you guys. Right? And it goes low, high, high, low. Because that's very, very hard to parry.
Right.
Right? It is a deliberate misdirection. So even if they are in time, they're going to get fucked. Right? And you see it in Lignitzer, Sword and Buckler. Right? He goes Sver, like ear, Scheidel, pull, thrust low. Right? And so you're driving their parries up and then you attack low. Right? So there's this intelligent construction if you are going to fall to playing a game on the beat.
Right.
Right?
Right. So I'm going to use we're going to sort of throw some red meat at anyone who's here because of the video game conversation that we had last week, which is,
I think there were 3.
If we're going to extend the metaphor, the video game metaphor, right? So there's a thing that you can do in video games, right? Like, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but like, if I'm in a fighting game, if I try and hit you and you block, right? Someone is at advantage, someone is at a disadvantage, or no one's at an advantage. Right. So that's the way that it works. Right. And there's all these numbers associated with it that no one actually, when you're starting to learn how to play these games, understands or cares. Right. But the idea is there's a way that I can force you. So I can press a button. I can attack you with some kind of action, and it leaves me with advantage, and you can still block my next action. Right. So you can continue to block my next action. There's no question that you'll be able to block it. But I'm still plus, right? And so what I can do is I can continue attack. Now, the idea in a video game is eventually, as you press buttons, that advantage diminishes, right? So like if I continue my block string long enough where I'm negative, now you can take your turn back. Right.
Yeah.
So the idea is what you want in those moments is for people to think that it's their turn, press a button, and then you hit them.
Sure.
Right. That's what you're looking for. Right. And the question is, how well does the person on the other end understand the metadata here, right? Or the frame data, as it were. To know when they can take their turn back, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is an example of that kind of thing, right? So like, so I throw a Zverik, you parry. I throw another Zverik, you parry. Is it time to take your turn back? It might not be, right?
Right.
So like, so it depends on a lot of things. It depends on your perception in those moments. It depends on how fast your buttons are, right? Like what your frame data is,
sure.
your individual frame data. But it also just depends on, like, if I'm changing lines all the time, you don't necessarily know where, you don't know that you can get the kind of advantage where you can take your turn back, right?
Yeah.
If you throw a cut at me to my left side and I get on top of your blade and you're not falling off by the time I'm done, theoretically, it's my turn. Right?
Heck yeah. I mean, that's my sense sitting here.
Well, right. No, right. Exactly. Right. So like,
yeah.
But so if it's but that being said, I have to recognize, like, okay, I got the advantage. It's my turn. I have to take my turn.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I'm translating all of that, and in the meantime you're falling off again, well, then it doesn't matter that I got the advantage for that moment because you took your turn back. Right. You're no, it's still my turn. Right.
Right.
And so a lot of it is just developing the sensitivity, like, it's my turn, go. Right.
Yes.
And then eventually it's not even that. It's just go.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's just go.
Yeah.
So no more. There's no. We all know it's my turn. It's and that's what's happening. I'm gonna go now. That moment passed. I already went. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know, and like in horses, at least at my barn, we talk about primary thought and secondary thought. I mentioned it earlier and then gave no context, but like the idea is supposed to be your horse's primary thought has to be on you. They have to be paying the most attention to you. They can notice that the other horses out in the field just got their hay and they're whinnying, and your horse can notice that and wish they were out there. Mm-hmm. But if that becomes their primary thought, you're about to have a bad day as a rider, right?
Right.
So you have to keep their primary thought on you, and then they can secondarily think about whatever the fuck they want to think about.
Is it a sense of where you're like controlling, where you're actively controlling their primary thought? Where you're like guiding them to think, to behave certain ways, and that you're like actually taking command of their thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say yes, like that framing feels weird to me, but yeah, in the sense that, or at least the way my coach would explain it, or has explained it to me, is that whatever I'm doing has to be more important and more interesting than whatever the fuck else is happening in the world. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? And so part of that we could frame as the horse has to trust me to be in charge. And we could frame it as, you know, what, I mean, you can frame, like sometimes it gets framed as energy, like my energy has to be high or, you know, whatever. You know, yeah.
Well, so the reason I wondered that is that I haven't done this with horses, but I endeavor to do this with fencers. That was awesome.
Sorry.
That's great. So I endeavored to do this with fencers. So like I'm thinking my metaphor for this is like, remember those kids' toys that it's like a maze where there's a ball and there's a groove, and it's like a globular object, like that's clear plastic, and you just have to like turn it to get the ball to go through the various, and maybe it's a three-dimensional maze where you have to, right? So like, so when I'm fencing, what I'm trying to do is essentially command my training partner the way that I would this ball.
Sure.
Right. So I'm not thinking about what I'm doing.
Right.
Right. I am behaving in ways so that I can achieve the movement of my training partner.
Yes.
Right. You can take care of what you got to take care of. It's fine.
Nope. It's good. It's good.
Okay. All right, cool. So, so does that make sense? So like,
I think
I'm
so.
not thinking,
Yeah.
My goal is to move them. Right. My goal is not to behave. So like, I mean, certainly when I'm in a feeling out process to develop that connection, that shared flow state between me and my training partner, there's a feeling out. And so I'm just kind of feeling and responding. But my ultimate goal is to get them to move when I want them to move. It's like, I want you to step right now. I want you to step with your right foot to your right now. I want you to bind on my sword now. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling to see what you do, but in the same way as like a horse, right? I'm like, I want you to step your right foot here. Yeah. I want you to slalom, whatever you were doing with your horse in that video the other day.
Definitely slaloming. Yeah.
What is it called? Is there a technical name for it, or is it just slalom?
I was trying to do a half pass. Yeah. Whether or not I was beautifully successful is a whole different conversation. But yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Right. And as a writer, that a big piece of achieving that is having a clarity of thought about where the fuck the horse needs to go. Right. Yeah. It can't be.
And not what you have to do.
No,
you're not. Yeah, you don't have a clarity of thought of like, okay, I got to put my foot here, or like you can't do that.
Right.
Your body just.
Yeah.
Well, you have to start that way.
Right, and I mean that's exactly it. Right. I am still stuck in that place most of the time, and it is not my best writing or my best work.
Right.
Because I cannot. It's so undesirable. I cannot get my brain to shut the fuck up saying words at me about what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's not helpful because then I have no clarity of thought. I don't have a thought. I just have words about my hand.
Yeah. Yeah. You have like an internal dialogue about what you're like your body and stuff. And it's not, you're like detached from the rest of the world.
Yes. Yes. I'm so busy thinking about what my body should do. My body isn't doing it. Right. And so therefore, because the horse can't read my thoughts actually. So it doesn't help her. And so then we both get frustrated, so there it is. Right. But, it's kind of, but we seek to develop the same thing for our training partners / students / people we're coaching. Right. Mm-hmm. I'm going to try to give you a clarity of feel through this moment, through this time, without intersecting words or inappropriate time changes, right? Mm-hmm. That are nonsensical.
That that you're not ready to observe, right? Like you can't even see that. Yeah. So it's just
right. Yeah, exactly. So I'm trying to have this clarity of thought to give to the person I'm working with so that they can then maybe get rid of saying with their mouth, Jess, what am I supposed to be doing with my sword right now? Right. And they can just do their sword, mm-hmm. And so that's that. But, it was a fun framing, thinking about primary thoughts and secondary thoughts and how specifically that applies to Zornhaus / Sprechfenster, because mm-hmm. if you just cut with a question, mm-hmm. that is not a Zornhaus.
Right. I agree. Yes, that's a great, that's not a Zorn. And there's a reason that a Zornhaus mechanically, it's not special, right? So
it's not special. Yeah.
So the specialness, the reason we give it a name is because of things that are going on other than that, right?
Yeah. Right.
So I'm thinking about two metaphors, sports metaphors, basketball and baseball. So if I'm throwing a baseball, right? What am I thinking about? Right? I want to throw a baseball. I'm playing catch with my friend. When I'm deciding, okay, now it's time to throw a baseball, what's going through my head in that moment, right?
Right.
Them.
Yeah.
The other person, right? I'm thinking about them, their mitt, right? And getting the baseball to them, to that space, that geographic space, right? I'm not thinking one iota about anything on my body. Right? Maybe before I throw, I get the ball in my hand the way I want it to be, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I'm just I need to get the ball to them, right?
Yeah.
And if I start thinking about, well, I got to have my arm, my elbow needs to come down and everything needs to be in a straight line or whatever. It's
it's already, you already haven't thrown the ball.
Right. And so, and then dribbling a basketball, right? We've talked about this before. If I'm trying to dribble the ball, so if there's a beat, right? And I have a ball in my hand and I'm trying to dribble the basketball, right? If I'm trying to dribble it on the beat, like where the ball hits the ground when the beat happens, yeah, I'm not thinking about how I'm dribbling or like when I have to press down.
Right.
Right. I'm not thinking about the and, right? So I'm thinking about the beat and I'm thinking about the ball hitting the ground. So whatever happens with this is going to, you know what I'm saying? It's going to be super natural and not something I'm thinking about, not sort of directly developed, right?
Yeah.
What I'm going to be intellectualizing is the ball hitting the ground. And so really what we need to do as martial artists is to try and think about the other thing that's going on and develop our body and our muscle memory to behave the way that it needs to achieve this thing that's other personal, right?
Yes. Right. And so, okay, so like, let's even talk about the abnehmen part, right? Mostly, I'm like, when I'm coaching people, I'm mostly focused and paying attention to like how they're leaving and how big they're making that and how much time they're giving and all that stuff. Cause like, you're going to hit me. Like, I'm not too fucking worried about that. But of course we know that's once that beginning part is working, then you know the end part also has to create a cover. You can't hit me without making cover. I mean, one can, but that's not best, right? And so like, so how did I help that student clear that up, right? I could have started talking to her about lines and flug and fucking angles of hands and, you know, and I was like, no, okay, take off and hit my sword. Take off and hit my sword. Take off and knock my sword down, right? So she does that however many times they did that, right? And then I'm like, okay, take off and hit me, right? And so they do that. And they're like very extended, hitting me. And so there's hitting my sword, which is hands down and to the side, and hitting me, which is hands up and way out here. And I was like, okay, somewhere in there is a sweet spot,
right,
where you're going to hit me and then you're going to hit my sword and it's going to go ta-dunk.
Right.
It's going to go ta-dunk like that. Me sword, me sword, me sword. And they were like, really? And I was like, yes, there is a place in there you can find. And then I just let them do that until it went ta-dunk. And I was like, yes, that's what you want every time. And then they nailed it every single time. Right. And I didn't have to talk to them about why they wanted that or what, you know, I didn't try to micromanage their body. I just said,
right,
you wanted to go ta-dunk. And I made those noises.
Right.
You know?
And then I would also say that there is a place for sort of, I wouldn't call it micromanaging the body, but more like once that's been done 10,000 times, right? And they can just do that as part of their warm-ups, right? So like we've talked about this before, and when I'm having class, one of the ways that we will warm up with swords, so like we always do like a regular warm-up or whatever, but one of the ways that we'll warm up with swords is we'll do just bind pressure drills. So like people who are advanced players who have been doing this for several years will have all of the stimulus, right? So they'll have Zorn pressure, they'll have Absetzen pressure, they'll have winding pressure, they'll have taking off pressure, they'll have changing through pressure, and geometry, like there's geometries involved in all of these things too, right? So it's like pressure and geometry. And you know, the goal is you incorporate everything that you can do comfortably to 70 to 80% success, right? So like if you're just giving me so many random options that I can only get 40% of it right, then we dial it back. We say like, okay, can we just let's just stick with 2. I do 2. Then okay, 100% of the time I'm doing 2. Got it. 3. Okay, 100% of the time I'm doing 3. 4. All right, 92% of the time I'm doing 4. Okay, 5. Right, and now it's like 75% of the time I'm doing 5. Let's stick with 5. right? So we do 5, and they might be wind, take off, absetzen, ansetzen, whatever, change through, right? And that's it, right? And those, and there are very clear and deliberate. So like anyone who's doing this will always have clear and deliberate pressure signals that anybody looking from the side of the class can say, this is what they should be doing in this moment, right? But then that also requires the coach understands, right? So maybe the person, the student in this drill can do 20 different pressure signals, right? But the coach, this is the coach's 4th class, right? So maybe they can literally only give pressure for change through, because that's the easiest type of pressure to give, right?
Sure.
Is change through. Even easier than pressure to thrust.
Oh yeah.
In the face, right? Sure. Because not doing anything with a sword is harder, way harder for a brand new person than like overextending by pushing the other sword aside.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So then in this case, the student who is a seasoned veteran knows all of the different says, okay, got it. We'll just do change through. I'll change through with you, right? Until you get it as a coach, like this is what change through pressure looks like. And then we add some distance or whatever, and now all of a sudden it's change through pressure or take off pressure. Right. So, but yeah, so the idea is to just develop in this warm-up decision making, right? So and like we can do drills, we can do body mechanics, we can talk high level theory later, we can talk psychology and frame data and whatever way you want to frame, but like being able to perceive a decision, a moment, an instance in time where a decision is to be made, respond to that decision with the correct option, right? And then eventually make that so seamless that it's just happening, it's just happening as a matter of your body's, doing the thing. Right?
Yeah, for sure. And like, I mean, even decision becomes a misnomer at some point, right?
Yeah, right. It's sort of stimulus.
It's just is, right? Like
a chemical reaction.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure, because everything kind of is eventually. But like thinking about like how a human walks, like a piece of walking is how much pressure is on the ball of your foot, tells your body to like do the next chain of things that leads you to the next step, right? And which is why women walking in high heels have a certain look, because that change of pressure is off, right? And there's a million other things happening too, but like that's a huge piece of it.
Or just climbing stairs, right? Just climbing stairs. Right?
Yeah.
Like I don't tell myself like, okay, I'm going to have to change the way that I interact with gravity and the ground now because I'm right. And the fun of fencing, if we get to like the highest level or a higher level than decision making, is playing around with why do we have to put warning signs up on stairs that are old and each tread isn't the same height? Because people fucking fall down them, because we all get in a rhythmic habit of movement that is built into us. So now all of a sudden, you cut at me and I throw out a thing and I'm like, I'm just going to step in and thrust James because he gave me that pressure. Oh shit, I got duplier into the face because I never saw that coming, because James set that stair tread up separate to what I was expecting. And I just walked into that. Right. Right.
And that's Indes.
Well, that's Indes, right? And it's also like, that's what I would say fencing is, right? Like, and the thing is, you can fence, like, if you know how to do two things. If you know how to ansetzen and durchwechseln, right? If
you
those
can do
are
a lot of fencing.
You can do a lot of fencing. You can, because fencing is getting in the head of your opponent and using the various options that they have accessible to them, to try and get them to commit to an option that's the wrong option for that stimulus, right? Like, that's so.
Yeah.
Now, the game of fencing is super elaborate. There's so many variables, so much complexity, right? But if you just stripped as much of that away as you could, and you said, okay, the game of fencing that we're going to play is, you're either going to thrust, strengthen, or chains through, right? It becomes a kind of rocks, paper, scissors. Right?
Yeah.
It becomes a kind of rocks, paper, scissors. But the difference is, we're not shooting at the same time.
Hopefully not.
Right? Well, no, like, so in rocks, paper, scissors, like rocks, paper, scissors, shoot, right?
Whatever, I know, but it was a fun pun, and I was with it.
Right? So with this game, we can be like, I want to get you to show me your rock.
Yeah.
Just before I commit my scissors.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I get to choose paper, and boom. Right? Like, that's the beauty of that. And you can do that with those three, just those three things. Right?
Right.
And then
really,
you're fencing.
Rocks, paper, scissors is perfect, because people that are really, really good at that do perceive what's coming out before it comes out. Like, they see those micro twitches in the hand. Yeah.
They're either doing that or they're reading. And this actually gets to where I wanted to go today and last week, but we still haven't made it there.
No, because we're almost out of time.
Which is psychology in fencing, right? So
yeah, okay.
So you and I are students of a particular tradition of swordsmanship that gives us pretty clear ways that the pieces on the chessboard move or should move, right? Like, how we're going to move the pieces on our chessboards, right? The knight is going to move in an L shape. The bishop is going to move diagonally, right? Against this pressure, I'm going to take off. Against this pressure, I'm going to chains through. Against this pressure, I'm going to wind. And this pressure, I'm going to thrust. So there's a lot of benefit to that, because the system, seemingly, or at least the way I interpret it, is designed to keep you as safe as possible for as long as possible as you move through the various distances and the various Vornach thing, right? Like, we always keep our sword in front of us and between their sword and us. We throw, but then there's a question of, is there a place for allowing our ability to read our opponent and know what their choice is going to be, right? Before we get the stimulus, or conditioning them to make certain choices before we get the physical, before we see those twitches, right? Before we, right? And I like the rock, paper, scissors example, because sometimes they do see the twitch. They're like, easy to rock, right? And that's actually true about people who play rock, paper, scissors at a high level. Believe it or not, you can, right?
Yeah.
But other people use psychological reads, right? They say, he threw scissors 3 times, right? And I know that, or I know that he's going to try and juke me out. He's going to throw scissors again a 4th time or whatever, right? Like,
right.
And being able to be at that level psychologically. And is there a place for that in fencing? And that's a discussion that I've been having a lot lately.
Really?
Well, I mean, no, so should we fence according to the logic and the coherence of Lichtenauer, and just rely on our ability to perceive the exact pressure at the exact right time to choose our action? Or should we allow for our sense of the rules and our ability to perceive our partner's intention before they give a physical manifestation of it to decide what to do? Does that make sense? We'll talk more about it another time.
I think so. I find myself perplexed that's I couldn't perceive someone being interested in not utilizing that, or thinking that was not the way. I mean, well, whatever. We'll save it for next time, because apparently that's going to be a deep dive. But
there are some masters, some historical fencing masters, that would take the approach that everything is science.
Yeah,
it's all science.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And what I have to do is I have to develop my sensitivity to always do the exact right thing given the conditions.
Yeah.
Like there's always a perfect right thing to do, and it never has to, and it's always physical and material, and it never has to do with, never has to do with psychology. That's like the Spanish masters in the 1600s is that would be their approach juxtaposed with, I mean, this is what their beef was with the Italians, was that they're just kind of random.
We should have Puck Curtis on to talk with us about it.
We should.
Because I don't know anything about this really.
Or Rob Rutherford would be another person.
Oh yeah, sure. That would be another option.
Well, both of them. In fact, we will have both of them on. I'm letting them
Let's just do
right
that. That would be smarter.
And we just sit here like this.
Yeah, right? And go, gentlemen.
Right. Who is better?
Right? Interesting. Okay, well, my hot take is I believe in magic. So yeah, let's, get weird. I don't know. But I do think that's interesting. What does Leishauer say? He says, test the mind no more than hard or soft. That's all he tells us. So,
right. So what side of that does he come? Does he come on? I think initially or superficially, it seems like he's sort of more interested in at least in terms of what he's teaching. It seems like he's more interested in there are correct things to do based on what's physically happening. In terms of what he's teaching, right? But that doesn't mean that he's not saying like, hey, these are all just the way the pieces move. Once you can just do all this stuff, then it becomes a game.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to defend the negative, right? Because we don't really have
right. And the other thing too, though,
but
another way that you could approach that question is be like, well, he does have a lot of different, like these different setups that seems like he's interested in confusing things, right? Like to develop a sort of a mental stack on the opponent.
Yeah.
Right. Just the more they have to keep track of, the less reliable their decision making, their sort of intuitive decision making is going to be. And he has a lot of stuff, right? And so you could say, well, that's just to show you how all this stuff is interconnected, or you could say, no, this is psychological warfare. I mean, like if I just Zorn every time, I could respond perfectly to all of the signals, but eventually you're going to figure out how to get ahead of me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If I add other things into the thing, then
into the mix. Okay. Well, thankfully I have a week to think about how I might approach that conversation. Yeah. I don't know.
All right. So there we go. So next week.
All right.
The table
next week. All right. That sounds good. We'll do that. All right. We're going to end it there. It's ridiculous.